The vast emptiness of space stretched out before the alien fleet, filled with ships that seemed to go on forever. These ships weren't just large. They were massive, towering over anything humanity had ever created. The fleet, a coalition of alien races, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Armed with weapons of unimaginable power, their ships gleamed with advanced technology, some so complex that they could manipulate time itself. This was the final push. Earth would be conquered, its defenses nothing more than a slight inconvenience. Their target? A small blue planet at the edge of a quiet solar system. Earth, a planet the alien fleet had long dismissed as insignificant, with nothing more than primitive life forms and outdated technologies. They were wrong, but they didn't know that yet. As the alien fleet neared the Earth, the ship's colossal forms overshadowed everything around them. Each one had the power to wipe out entire cities in a blink. And yet, as they got closer to Earth, the fleet stopped in its tracks. A lone human warship, barely a fraction of the size of the alien vessels, appeared on the radar. The aliens couldn't help but laugh. Their leader, Commander Zoreth, sneered as he looked at the small human ship. It looked ancient. An old design, clunky and fragile. It was nothing more than a speck in the vastness of space. Is this their final line of defense? Zoreth scoffed, shaking his head. Such a pathetic display. It will be obliterated within minutes. He turned to his fleet. Engage. Show these humans what true power is. As the alien ships closed in, their massive engines hummed with raw power, and their weapons powered up. The tiny human ship, standing alone against the might of 1,000 ships, seemed like a joke. The crew of the alien vessels exchanged mocking looks. Some of them even sent out taunting transmissions, challenging the humans to surrender before the battle even began. Back aboard the human warship, the atmosphere was anything but fear. The crew, a group of soldiers and engineers led by Captain Riza, knew the odds. They had been trained for moments like this, prepared for the impossible. While they didn't have the sheer power of the alien fleet, they had something just as important, the element of surprise. Captain Riza stood at the command center of the ship, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen as he watched the alien fleet draw closer. Despite the magnitude of the threat, there was a calmness in his demeanor. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his mind calculating the next steps. He knew the alien fleet was overconfident, complacent in their superiority. And that would be their downfall. Activate cloaking, Captain Riza commanded. His voice was steady, betraying no hint of the pressure he felt. The crew, loyal and skilled, moved quickly to follow his orders. Outside, the human ship began to shimmer and disappear from the alien sensors. The cloaking technology wasn't perfect, but it was enough to conceal their movements, at least for a while. The aliens couldn't see them anymore, but they didn't know that yet. As the human ship went dark, Riza's mind raced. He knew this could be their last stand. The alien fleet was too powerful for them to win with brute force. Their only hope was to outsmart the invaders, to use their advanced technology and knowledge of their own ship to their advantage. But even with all the preparation and training, the odds were still astronomical. The crew had trained for years, preparing for moments like this. They were a small, tight-knit group, and they had grown close during their long journeys together. They all knew what was at stake, not just their lives, but the survival of their home planet. Earth was counting on them, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. In the quiet of the command center, the crew members exchanged determined glances. The tension in the room was palpable. They had trained to face enemies far stronger than them, but this was different. This wasn't just an enemy. They were facing a giant, a force so powerful that even the bravest of soldiers would be intimidated. But not the humans. They had something that the aliens didn't, the will to fight, no matter the odds. Riza turned to his communications officer, a woman named Lena, who was standing at her post, her fingers flying across the console. "Are we ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Lena nodded, her face serious. "Everything's in place, Captain. We're cloaked, shields are up, and the weapons are primed. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Riza gave a brief nod of approval. He trusted her completely. Lena was one of the best officers on the ship, and she had been with him from the beginning. If anyone could help them turn the tide, it was her. "Good. Keep us hidden as long as you can. We'll strike when the time is right," Reza said, his eyes never leaving the view screen. The tension in the command center mounted as the seconds ticked by. Each member of the crew had a job to do, and they did it with precision. They had trained for months, preparing for an attack like this. Now, it was all coming down to this one moment. Outside the ship, the alien fleet loomed larger with every passing second. The aliens' confidence only grew, unaware of the humans' plan. The human ship, now invisible to their sensors, moved silently through the void of space, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Riza's mind remained sharp as the moments stretched on. He knew they couldn't afford to make a mistake. They had to hit the aliens hard and fast, or this mission would end in disaster. But deep down, he believed in his crew. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. They weren't just a group of soldiers. They were Earth's last hope. At last, the alien fleet moved within striking distance. They were within range of the human ship's weapons. It was time. Riza's voice cut through the quiet of the command center. "Activate the weapon systems. Prepare for engagement." Lena's fingers flew across the controls as the ship's weapons powered up. The crew braced themselves for what was coming next. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed in every way. But they weren't about to back down. The alien ships were still unaware of the human ship's position, and for just a moment, the humans had the advantage. Riza's hand hovered over the launch button as his crew held their breath. This was their chance, and they had to make it count. The alien fleet was close enough now. Riza's finger came down on the button, and the first blast of energy tore through space, striking one of the alien warships. The shockwave rocked the human ship, but the aliens had been caught completely off guard. Their ships exploded into flames, their shields shattered by the surprise attack. For a moment, the entire fleet stopped, stunned by the human counterattack. They had expected the humans to crumble in an instant, but now they were realizing that they were up against something much more dangerous than they had anticipated. The battle had just begun. The humans had struck first, and it was a direct hit. The aliens weren't laughing anymore. The battle for Earth's survival was about to unfold, and no one was prepared for what would come next. The tiny human ship had just shown the alien fleet that they were not to be underestimated. The humans were ready to fight, and they would not go down without a struggle. The alien fleet, massive and unyielding, advanced with terrifying precision. Their ships moved like a dark cloud, blotting out the stars as they prepared to bring Earth to its knees. Captain Riza watched the view screen with a steely gaze. He knew that Earth's survival depended on this moment. He could feel the weight of his crew's eyes on him, each member bracing themselves for the battle ahead. There was no turning back now. Riza's fingers gripped the armrests of his command chair. The alien ships were closing in fast, their weapons systems ready to unleash devastating firepower. But the humans aboard their warship weren't scared. They weren't going to let the aliens have the satisfaction of an easy victory. "Stay cloaked," Riza ordered, his voice unwavering despite the rising tension. The ship, now hidden from the alien sensors, drifted silently within the fleet, waiting for the right moment. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, knowing that every second brought them closer to their one chance to strike. Outside, the alien ships moved into position. They were so confident in their superiority that they didn't even bother to scan for hidden ships. They were just moments away from unleashing their first salvo against the tiny human vessel, which, to them, was no more than a nuisance. A laughable defense for a planet that had no real place in the galaxy. The silence aboard the human ship was broken only by the low hum of the cloaking system and the quiet, steady breathing of the crew. The tension was thick in the air as the aliens drew closer. Then suddenly, without warning, the alien ships opened fire. The first barrage of energy blasts tore through the dark void, lighting up the space around them in a cascade of bright flashes. It was a massive display of power, but the human ship remained untouched, invisible to their sensors. The aliens fired again, thinking that the human ship had somehow evaded the first volley. They didn't realize that the humans weren't running. They were waiting. Captain Reese's hand hovered over the control panel. The moment he had been waiting for was almost here. He knew the aliens would expect them to be defenseless, just another small ship that would be easily destroyed. But he had a surprise for them. "Now," Riza commanded. His voice rang with authority, cutting through the silence of the command center. The ship's cloaking flickered, then vanished completely. In that instant, the human warship reappeared, its sleek form breaking through the shadows as it lined up with the alien fleet. The ship's massive energy cannons hummed to life, glowing with raw power. Without hesitation, Riza ordered the first strike. The energy cannons fired, sending brilliant beams of light streaking across the battlefield. The alien ships, still caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the human vessel, were hit before they could react. The blasts tore through their shields, leaving small scorch marks on their massive hulls. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it was enough to make them pause, stunned by the unexpected resistance. The crew held their breath as the blasts connected. The sound of the explosions reverberated through the ship, a mixture of satisfaction and fear. The humans had struck first, and they had made an impact. But that was just the beginning. The alien fleet quickly recovered, their advanced technology allowing them to regroup faster than the humans had anticipated. They were shaken but not defeated. And now, they were looking for the human ship. Reese's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the alien ships scramble to reposition. The human ship had revealed itself, and now the battle for survival was truly beginning. He could see the alien warships moving into a formation that would allow them to close in on the human vessel. They had superior firepower, and they were starting to adjust to the surprise attack. "We can't keep hiding forever," Riza muttered under his breath. The human ship wasn't equipped to face the full might of the alien fleet head-on. The cloaking device was powerful, but it wasn't permanent. The alien ships were starting to track the human ship's movements, and soon they would figure out how to break through the cloaking system. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Reza ordered. His mind raced as he thought of every possible option to keep the ship safe. The alien warships closed in, and the human ship began to move, twisting and turning through the darkness of space. The aliens fired again, their beams of energy streaking past the human vessel in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The human ship dodged, twisting out of the way just in time to avoid the blasts. But the alien ships were relentless. They kept firing, hoping to land a hit that would finally bring down the human ship. Reese's pulse quickened as the alien warships locked onto them. He could feel the weight of the crew's expectations. This battle wasn't just about defeating the aliens. It was about proving that humanity was more than just a target. It was about showing the galaxy that humans could stand up to even the most advanced and deadly forces. The first wave of attacks had been successful, but the real challenge was just beginning. The alien fleet was regrouping, and soon they would be back with even more firepower. "Brace for impact," Reza called out, his voice steady even as he felt his nerves tightening. The next few minutes would determine the fate of their ship and of Earth. The alien warships locked onto the human ship, preparing for their counterattack. It was clear that the aliens were furious now. They had underestimated the humans at first, but that had been their mistake. And now, they were determined to finish what they had started. But the humans weren't going down without a fight. Despite being outgunned and outmanned, they had something that the aliens didn't: creativity, resourcefulness, and the will to survive. The alien ships were faster, stronger, and more advanced, but the human crew was determined to adapt and fight back in ways the aliens had never expected. As the battle raged on, the human ship weaved through the alien fleet, firing its weapons at every opportunity. The energy beams from the human ship struck one of the alien warships again, causing it to shudder. This time, the damage was more severe. The alien ship's shield flickered, and the hull began to crack. The humans had found their mark, and the aliens were beginning to realize that they weren't dealing with an easy target. The battle for Earth was now in full swing. The humans had taken the first step, striking the alien fleet when they least expected it. But the war was far from over. The aliens would come back stronger, but the humans would fight just as hard. The crew of the human ship didn't stop. They knew that the only way to win was to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting, no matter how overwhelming the odds. This was Earth's fight, and they were going to make sure it wasn't one that would be forgotten. The fate of Earth rested on the shoulders of these brave soldiers, and they weren't about to let it slip away. The battle had only just begun, but it was already clear that this would be a fight for survival, a fight to prove that humans were more than just a speck in the galaxy, more than a weak target for the alien fleet. Captain Rizzo gripped the command chair as the hum of the ship's systems vibrated through the deck. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The crew was doing their best, but they were outmatched. Yet they were still alive, and they were fighting with everything they had. "Hold your positions," Rizzo commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. The alien ships, still reeling from the initial strike, were now closing in with renewed determination. Their massive forms loomed in the distance, their weapons charging, ready to unleash destruction. But the tiny human ship wasn't standing still. It darted through space, a blur of movement against the vast, empty backdrop. The cloaking device shimmered, making it nearly invisible to the alien sensors. The humans knew that their best chance for survival lay in their ability to stay unpredictable, constantly moving, always changing position, never giving the aliens a clear shot. The ship's AI systems were working overtime, calculating trajectories, dodging incoming blasts, and guiding the ship's evasive maneuvers with a precision that surprised even the human crew. It was as if the ship itself was alive, anticipating the alien movements before they even happened. Every decision was made in split seconds, every twist and turn a calculated risk. Captain Rizzo watched the tactical display closely. The human ship was moving erratically, weaving in and out of the alien fleet's attack range. It wasn't just speed that gave the ship its edge. It was the element of surprise. The aliens hadn't expected Earth to have such advanced technology. Their arrogance had blinded them to the humans' resourcefulness. Rizzo's hand flew over the control panel. "Fire missile barrage," he ordered. A series of rapid-fire missiles shot from the human ship, streaking toward the nearest alien warship. The missiles hit their target with precision, exploding on contact and sending the massive ship into a violent spin. Its shields flickered and collapsed under the force of the blast, revealing a vulnerable point on its hull. The humans didn't let up. They knew that any moment could be their last, but they weren't about to back down. Every strike was a calculated risk. Every missile launched a desperate attempt to level the playing field. The crew worked together seamlessly, their movements synchronized, each person doing their part in the fight for survival. One of the missiles struck the weak spot on the alien warship, causing a massive explosion that sent debris flying into space. For a moment, the ship's systems faltered, leaving it exposed. The humans seized the opportunity, launching a second barrage, this time targeting the warship's engines. The alien ship shuddered as another explosion ripped through its hull. It was far from defeated, but it was clear that the humans had made their mark. Meanwhile, the rest of the alien fleet regrouped, their ships now more cautious, adjusting their tactics. They had underestimated the humans before, but now they knew better. The battle wasn't going to be as easy as they had thought. The human ship's sensors blinked red as more alien vessels closed in, their weapons charged, ready to unleash hell. Rizzo's mind raced as he thought of their next move. The humans had proven they could land a few blows, but they were still outmatched. The alien ships were larger, stronger, and better equipped. Yet Riza refused to concede. He knew that this was a fight they couldn't afford to lose. Evasive maneuvers, he commanded. The human ship banked sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding a wave of deadly energy blasts from an alien ship. The ship shuddered with each near miss. But the crew held firm. They were doing the impossible. They were surviving. The aliens, now fully aware of the human ship's ability to dodge and retaliate, began to retaliate with overwhelming force. A barrage of energy blasts rained down on the human ship, each one stronger than the last. The ship rocked violently as each blast struck, but the crew held their ground. The shields flickered, holding up just long enough to absorb the impact before regenerating. Riza's heart raced as he watched the display. The alien ships were closing in, and the human vessel was running out of options. The odds were stacking up against them, but the humans weren't backing down. Each strike from the alien fleet brought them closer to the edge, but they refused to give in. "Hold on," Riza shouted over the comms. "We're not done yet." The crew pressed forward, their fingers flying over the controls, adjusting the ship's course and weapon systems. Each person had their role to play, and they worked together in perfect harmony. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for Earth. The AI continued to guide the ship, its calculations never missing a beat. It was the humans' greatest advantage. While the alien ships had brute force on their side, the humans had something more: ingenuity. They had a mind to outsmart their enemies, to use every advantage they had, no matter how small. The human ship moved like a shadow, ducking and weaving through the chaos of the battle. Explosions lit up the void around them, bright flashes of color in the cold emptiness of space. The alien ships were closing in, but the human ship was always one step ahead, dodging and attacking from unexpected angles. But even as the humans fought back, Riza knew the truth. Not everyone would make it out alive. He glanced around at the crew, each person focused on their task, their faces set with determination. He knew they were all doing their best, but the battle was taking its toll. The ship shook violently as another blast hit the shields. The lights flickered and alarms blared. The crew braced themselves for the next round of attacks. "Captain, the shields are failing," reported Lieutenant Collins, her voice tight with urgency. "We can't take much more of this." Riza's mind raced. He knew they had to make a move, and fast. The alien ships were closing in for the kill, and if they didn't act soon, it would be too late. "Prepare the final strike," Riza said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We have one chance to end this." The crew moved quickly, reloading the weapons, reprogramming the AI for the final phase of their counterattack. Riza knew this was their last chance. The alien fleet was strong, but the humans had one thing the aliens didn't: heart. As the alien ships closed in, the human ship fired one last barrage. The missiles streaked through space, hitting their targets with pinpoint accuracy. The explosions that followed were bright and blinding, lighting up the dark void with their fiery glow. For a moment, everything went still. The silence that followed the chaos was deafening. Then, slowly, the human ship emerged from the cloud of smoke and debris, still intact. The alien ships, battered and broken, drifted in space, their power fading. The battle wasn't over, but the humans had made their stand. They had fought back with everything they had, and it had been enough. The aliens, now fully aware of the humans' determination, hesitated. The tide had turned, and the humans had proven their worth. The battle raged on, and every moment felt like an eternity. The human ship, small and seemingly insignificant compared to the massive alien fleet, had already defied all expectations. They had survived the initial onslaught, struck back fiercely, and forced the alien ships to reconsider their strategy. But the cost of this struggle was becoming painfully clear. The crew, once full of hope and determination, now bore the weight of sacrifice and loss. Captain Riza gripped the command chair with white-knuckled fingers. his eyes glued to the chaotic scene unfolding before him. The ship was holding its own, but it was clear that the fight was taking a toll. Every blast, every maneuver, every strike was pushing them further into the unknown, and Riza knew that they could only keep this up for so long. "Report," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Shields are holding, Captain," Lieutenant Collins responded, her voice tight with strain. "But we've sustained significant damage. We're losing power to the engines." Riza nodded grimly, his mind already racing with possible solutions. But before he could respond, the ship jolted violently. An explosion rocked the hull, sending a shockwave through the entire vessel. "Report," Riza shouted, struggling to keep his balance. "Close quarters combat," Lieutenant Collins gasped. "Boarding parties from the alien ships. We're under attack from within." The crew scrambled to their stations, readying themselves for the next wave of enemy soldiers. Riza's heart pounded in his chest. The alien fleet had underestimated Earth's ability to fight back. But now, the humans had to face an entirely different challenge. As the boarding party stormed the ship, chaos erupted in the corridors. The humans fought back with everything they had, using every trick they had learned in training. But the alien soldiers were relentless. In the midst of the violence, Riza's best friend, Bonner, was leading a group of crew members in a desperate defense. Bonner had been with Riza since the beginning, a seasoned soldier who had seen more battles than most humans could ever imagine. He was strong, dependable, and unshakable in his loyalty to the crew and the mission. But this time, the odds were too great. As Riza moved to assist in the fight, he heard a shout. Turning around, he saw Bonner collapse to the floor, blood spilling from a wound in his side. Time seemed to slow as Riza rushed to his side, his heart racing. "Bonner," Riza cried, kneeling beside him. "Stay with me." Bonner's eyes flickered, and a weak smile appeared on his face. "Riza," he gasped, his voice faint. I knew it'd be you." "Don't talk like that," Reza said, his voice breaking as he tried to stop the bleeding. "We'll get you to the med bay. We'll get you patched up. You'll be fine." But Bonner shook his head, his breath coming in shallow gasps. I'm not going to make it," he whispered. "But I've fought with honor. And that's enough." His eyes locked with Riza's. Promise me you'll keep fighting. For Earth. For everyone." Tears welled up in Riza's eyes as he held Bonner's hand. "I promise, Bonner. I swear it." With one final breath, Bonner was gone. Riza's heart shattered, but he couldn't afford to let grief consume him. The battle was still raging, and his crew needed him now more than ever. Bonner's sacrifice had to mean something. They couldn't let it be in vain. Riza stood up slowly, his eyes hardening with renewed determination. "This isn't over," he muttered to himself. "We fight for him. We fight for Earth." He gave the order to continue fighting, but the loss of his best friend weighed heavily on him. The crew, too, was shaken by Bonner's death. He had been a symbol of their strength, a reminder of why they fought. And now he was gone. But they couldn't afford to stop. They couldn't afford to let their emotions distract them. The battle raged on. The human ship moved with precision, dodging plasma blasts and launching counterattacks with ruthless efficiency. Every missile, every strike, was infused with the crew's resolve to survive and avenge their fallen comrade. As the humans continued their assault, the alien fleet began to falter. They had underestimated the resilience of Earth's forces, and now they were paying the price. The human ship was still small, still outgunned, but it had something the aliens didn't: heart. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the alien flagship," Lieutenant Collins reported. Her voice was tinged with disbelief. "It's a surrender signal." Riza's brow furrowed. "A surrender?" he repeated, his voice full of suspicion. "After everything they've done, what kind of trick is this?" But as the alien ships began to retreat, the humans could see it was no trick. The alien fleet, battered and broken, was pulling back, their vessels drifting aimlessly in space. The humans had done the impossible. They had pushed back the mighty alien forces, and now the fleet was retreating in fear. The crew was stunned. They had fought like animals cornered, refusing to bow to the overwhelming odds. They had lost comrades, friends, and crew members, but they had prevailed. The alien fleet, once so confident in their power, now realized that Earth was not the insignificant, weak target they had assumed. The humans had fought back, and they had done so with everything they had. For a moment, the chaos around them seemed to quiet. The distant hum of the engines, the crackle of static in the comms, the dull thrum of weapons. Everything slowed down, and all that remained was the knowledge that they had won. It wasn't a victory without cost, but it was a victory nonetheless. Riza stood before his crew, his eyes hard but filled with pride. "We've made them afraid," he said, his voice hoarse from hours of battle. "But we've also lost so much. Bonner's sacrifice won't be forgotten. This victory is for him, and it's for all those who have fallen in this fight." The crew stood in solemn silence, their grief and triumph mingling in the air. The alien fleet had retreated, but the war wasn't over. They knew that there were still battles to be fought, challenges to face, but for the first time, they allowed themselves a brief moment of peace. And as they prepared to leave the battlefield, the crew knew one thing: they would never forget Bonner. His sacrifice had ignited something in them, a fire that would carry them forward, no matter the odds, no matter the challenges ahead. They were no longer just a small human ship facing impossible odds. They were warriors, and they had proven that they could fight and win. The battle may have been over, but the war for Earth and for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. And with Bonner's memory driving them forward, they were ready for whatever came next. The silence of space seemed to stretch endlessly. The battlefield had shifted, and the once imposing alien fleet was now in retreat. The human ship, battered and broken but still alive, floated in the vast emptiness, facing its greatest challenge yet. The alien flagship, a colossal vessel that towered over the human ship, loomed like a shadow in the distance. Its enormous form was surrounded by a ring of alien warships, their weapons powered up and ready to obliterate the human ship once and for all. But Captain Riza knew something the aliens didn't. The humans still had one final move to play. The crew of the human ship was tired, their faces drawn with exhaustion. They had fought through the worst of the battle, but they had no illusions about the fight ahead. They were outgunned, outclassed, and their ship was on the verge of falling apart. Yet, in the face of certain death, they had something the aliens didn't: determination. Riza stood at the front of the command center, staring at the view screen. The alien flagship filled the display, its weapons ready to fire, its massive engines thrumming with power. The crew members around him were quiet, waiting for his command. Riza's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the moment bearing down on him. This was it, the final confrontation. "Captain," Lieutenant Collins said softly, her voice tinged with concern. "We're down to 30% power. We can't keep this up much longer." Riza nodded. He knew. The ship was barely holding together, but they had one thing left to do. "All hands, brace for impact," Riza shouted, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "We're going to hit them with everything we've got. This is our last chance. Let's make it count." The crew sprung into action. The final strike was risky, but they had no choice. Every human on the ship was ready to give everything for the chance to turn the tide of this battle. As the alien flagship advanced, the human ship used its remaining cloaking technology to disappear into the shadows of space. The alien fleet, unaware of the human ship's new position, continued to approach with deadly force. Riza held his breath, knowing that if they were spotted before they could strike, they would all be doomed. "Target locked," Lieutenant Collins called out, her voice steady even as she tapped at her console. "We're in range. One shot, Captain. This is it." The human ship emerged from the shadows, its engines flaring with the last of its energy. The alien ships were still too far away to react. Riza's eyes fixed on the massive alien flagship in the distance. The moment had come. "Fire," Riza commanded, his voice low but resolute. The ship's weapons roared to life, unleashing a torrent of energy toward the alien flagship. The blast was powerful, its beam cutting through space like a fiery arrow. Time seemed to slow as the beam flew toward its target. Then, with a deafening explosion, the energy hit the flagship's core system. A massive shockwave rippled through the space around them, sending the surrounding alien ships into disarray. The flagship's shields flared and then collapsed entirely. The explosion that followed was catastrophic. Plumes of fire and debris erupted from the ship's center, spreading across the battlefield. The human ship shook with the force of the blast. The crew held on, bracing against the violent tremors that ran through the ship. But despite the chaos, they held their breath, watching the screen in disbelief. The alien flagship, once a symbol of their overwhelming power, was now burning in space, its massive form disintegrating into thousands of pieces. "We did it," Lieutenant Collins whispered, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "We really did it." But the victory was not without its price. The human ship was severely damaged, its systems failing one by one. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the low hum of the engines was barely audible. The ship had done its job, but it couldn't keep going for much longer. As the alien fleet regrouped, the humans knew they had one final task to complete. The flagship might be gone, but the alien forces were still a threat. They couldn't let the aliens escape, not after everything that had been lost. "Captain, the fleet is retreating," Lieutenant Collins said, her voice urgent. "But they're still in control. If we don't stop them now, they'll regroup and come back stronger." Riza clenched his fists, his mind racing. There was no time to think. This was the last chance they had. "We need to take out their command center. We fire one last shot, and we make it count," Riza ordered, his voice cold and firm. The crew moved quickly, working together with a sense of unity that had been forged in the fires of battle. They had lost so much, but they weren't going to stop until the aliens were defeated completely. The human ship, using the last of its energy, lined up its weapons for one final strike. Riza's eyes narrowed as he stared at the alien fleet. The command center of the alien force was the last obstacle between them and complete victory. "Ready," Lieutenant Collins called. "Final shot in 3, 2, 1. Fire," Riza said, his voice filled with finality. The shot flew across the battlefield, a brilliant beam of energy that hit the alien fleet's command center directly. The blast was devastating, and it created a chain reaction that destroyed the entire command center. The alien fleet, leaderless and in disarray, began to retreat in full panic. The once proud armada now had no direction, no leadership, and no chance of survival. The human crew watched in stunned silence as the alien ships scattered into the vastness of space, their once imposing formation shattered. The battle had been won, but it had come at a cost. The human ship was a shadow of its former self. The crew had given everything, and now there was nothing left but the wreckage of a victory that felt more like survival. Riza stood in the command center, his eyes scanning the view screen. The alien fleet was gone, but the silence of space was deafening. His ship, broken and battered, had somehow won against all odds. He had led his crew to victory, but at the cost of so much. So many lives had been lost, so many sacrifices had been made. "Captain," Lieutenant Collins said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "We did it. Earth is safe." Riza nodded slowly, his eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. "We did," he said quietly, "but it was a victory we had to earn, with everything we had." The crew stood together, their faces marked by exhaustion, pain, and a hard-earned sense of triumph. They had faced the impossible, and they had won. The alien fleet had underestimated them, and now they were the ones who would remember Earth's defiance. And as the human ship drifted through the vastness of space, its mission complete, Riza and his crew knew one thing for sure. Earth had proven that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The once mighty alien fleet had been shattered, and the human ship, though severely damaged, had emerged victorious. The survivors, weary and battered, began their long journey back home. It wasn't a clear path. The ship limped through space, its hull cracked, and its systems running on fumes. But every human on board knew one thing: Earth had survived. For now, humanity was safe. Riza stood at the front of the bridge, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. The stars seemed to twinkle quietly in the distance, a silent reminder of the universe's vastness. But it wasn't the stars that held his attention now. It was the memory of the battle, the faces of the men and women who had fought beside him, and the sacrifices made along the way. As the ship drifted onward, its engines barely functional, the crew moved through the wreckage. The once proud vessel had been reduced to a battered shell, but it had served its purpose. It had carried humanity's final stand against an alien force that had underestimated them all. And in the end, it had been the humans, small, outgunned, and outclassed, who had stood victorious. Riza's mind kept returning to Bonner, his best friend, and one of the first to fall in battle. He could still see Bonner's face, the way his eyes had held a fierce determination even in the final moments of his life. Bonner had been more than just a crew member. He had been family. His death had struck a deep blow to Riza, one that would never truly heal. But it was Bonner's spirit that had pushed them forward, the memory of his courage that had helped them win against all odds. The crew, though devastated, had fought on for those who had fallen. Every sacrifice made in that battle had been for the future. And now, with the alien fleet in retreat, that future seemed just a little brighter. But there was still a long road ahead. The victory was important, but it was only one battle in a much larger war. Riza stepped away from the bridge and walked through the ship's narrow corridors, each step heavy with the weight of what had been lost. He passed through the medical bay, where the wounded were being tended to, and caught sight of a few familiar faces. The crew was bruised, exhausted, and many were still recovering from the emotional toll of the battle. They had all been through so much together, and the toll of the fight showed in their eyes. They had faced death at every turn, yet they had prevailed. As the human ship made its way back toward Earth, Riza couldn't help but reflect on how far humanity had come. Just days ago, they had been the underdogs, the weak, insignificant species that no one had bothered to notice. The alien fleets had mocked them, underestimated their strength, and assumed they would be easy prey. But the battle had proven them wrong. Humanity had fought with everything it had. They had used their resourcefulness, their adaptability, and their determination to overcome an enemy far more advanced than they could ever have imagined. Riza had been at the center of it all, but he knew he hadn't done it alone. Every member of the crew had played a part. They had all contributed, each in their own way, to the final victory. They had put their lives on the line, and many of them had paid the ultimate price. They had fought for Earth, for each other, and for the future. And in the end, their courage had turned the tide. But even as the ship continued its slow journey home, the emotional weight of the battle was hard to ignore. Riza couldn't shake the image of Bonner, lying lifeless in the medical bay. His friend's death had left a hole that could never be filled. The victory they had won seemed somehow bittersweet, because it had come at such a heavy cost. But Riza knew that Bonner, like so many others, would never be forgotten. Their sacrifices would live on in the hearts and minds of every human who had witnessed this battle, and in every victory that would follow. Back on the bridge, Lieutenant Collins stood beside Riza, looking at the stars. She had been with him from the start, and like everyone else, she was haunted by the memories of the battle. "Captain," she said softly, her voice filled with respect and sorrow. "We did it. We won." Riza nodded, his gaze distant. "We did, but it wasn't just me. It was all of us. We've made history today. We've proven that humanity has a place in this galaxy," Collins said. "No one will ever underestimate us again." Riza turned to her, his expression hardening with resolve. "We've only just begun. We've won this battle, but the war is still out there. We've made our mark, but there's more to do." Collins looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and understanding. "You're right. There's always more to do. But for now, we've earned this victory. Earth is safe. We're safe." Riza nodded, but his thoughts remained heavy. They had survived, but at what cost? The faces of the fallen crew members were still fresh in his mind. They had given everything, and it was up to him to ensure their sacrifices meant something. As the ship drew closer to Earth, the stars ahead became more familiar. Earth was just within reach. The blue planet, the cradle of humanity, awaited them. The crew had fought for this moment, and now they were finally going home. Riza's heart swelled with a mix of emotions: relief, sorrow, and a deep sense of pride. The message of humanity's victory began to spread across the galaxy. Alien races who had once considered Earth an insignificant speck in the vastness of space were now forced to confront a new reality. The humans had proven that they were not weak, not helpless, but strong, resilient, and capable of standing up to even the most formidable of foes. The alien races would never forget the cost of underestimating humanity. Riza knew that the galaxy would change because of this victory. Humanity had shown that even the smallest species could rise up and fight for its place in the cosmos. No longer would humans be seen as insignificant. No longer would they be pushed around or dismissed. They had proven their strength, and they had earned the respect of the galaxy. As the human ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Riza stood once more at the bridge, looking out at the planet that had been his home. The war was over, for now, but the future remained uncertain. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had made its mark. It was only the beginning of a new chapter. Riza turned to the crew. "We've won," he said, his voice quiet but filled with the weight of everything they had just endured. "But we can't rest. This is only the start. There's a future waiting for us, and we have to be ready for it." The crew nodded, a quiet strength in their eyes. They had fought, and they had won. But the story of humanity in the cosmos was far from over. Riza and his crew had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And as the ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, they knew that their legacy would live on in the stars. For Earth, for Bonner, for all the fallen, humanity's strength would never be forgotten. And as they looked to the future, they knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never be the same again.